Disclaimer: the views and opinions expressed in this episode are those of the guests and do not necessarily reflect the official policy or position of USA Global TV and Radio. The content presented is for informational purposes only and is intended to foster open discussion and debate. Viewer discretion is advised. USA Global TV and Radio does not endorse any particular viewpoint and encourages viewers to seek out additional information and perspectives. Saving America with Dr. David D. Schein.
Welcome to USA Global TV and Radio, where our mission is to provide education, entertainment, hope, and inspiration. USA Global TV and Radio connects you with experts and audiences all around the world every single day to help you succeed in business and to live a richer life. Visit us at usaglobaltv.com to learn about career and life-changing training and mentoring programs like the Listening Mentor. Subscribe to our newsletter to stay informed about our special programs and offers. Discover how you can become a guest on one of our shows or a host or producer of a USA Global TV and Radio show of your very own. That's USA Global TV and Radio, where the doctor is always in.
Welcome to Saving America. This is your host, Dr. David D. Schein. In political news, the biggest story of the week by far was, of course, the Democrat National Convention, or DNC. Obviously, I have many thoughts on that, so many, in fact, that I'm going to cover it on its own. So stay tuned for that later in this episode. Something that would never happen in the private sector. Apparently, many federal employees are spending most of their time on taxpayers' payroll doing work for their unions. A bill recently proposed by the Republicans in Congress would end taxpayer-funded union activities by federal employees. Apparently, Trump tried to limit this to 25% of their work time, which I still find ridiculous, but Biden-Harris administration reversed this rule, and that means that you could have people on the federal payroll spending 100% of their time working on their union activities. One of my planks in Saving America is to have our federal workforce do real work or get fired. Doing union business should be on their own time, period, end of discussion. Speaking of federal misdeeds under Biden-Harris, the administration has recently been taking a victory lap over reducing prescription prices on certain drugs under Medicare. This was under the falsely labeled Inflation Reduction Act, the IRA. But guess what? A big price increase is going to follow for the overall policies that Medicare recipients pay. Why? To make up for the losses on the prescriptions. To avoid this hitting in an election year, get this, folks, the Centers for Medicaid and Medicare Services, CMS, planned a 3-year demonstration project to subsidize these premiums. It will keep them low during this period. But the subsidies are going to have to come from somewhere, right? It's estimated that the taxpayers will fund an increase in subsidies from $30 per recipient per month in 2024 to $142.70 a month in 2025. Just what we taxpayers need when the federal debt is already out of control. This is a totally unacceptable situation. On the economic front, there are many signs that things are not okay. Consumer credit card debt has surged past $1 trillion. If there are many defaults on this debt, this could ripple through the economy. The consumers flush with COVID cash ran through that cash now. The problem now is that many are still trying to spend at that level, but without the cash reserves because they've already been exhausted. Switching gears a bit. PRC persecution of Falun Gong spreads to the USA. My audience knows that I've expressed concern about the People's Republic of China persecution of the Chinese followers of the peaceful Falun Gong movement. In the US, Falun Gong has created Shen Yun, a performing group which is set up as a nonprofit foundation. Turns out, recently, 2 Chinese agents pled guilty to acting as unregistered agents and bribing an IRS agent to take away the nonprofit status of Shen Yun. This again emphasizes the importance of having a strong American government across the board that will not allow the PRC to do such shenanigans, certainly not inside the United States. Moving in a different direction, I did not usually cover show business in this report, but there's been an interesting development in the untimely death of popular Friends star Matthew Perry. He died just short of his 55th birthday. A stunning headline states that 5 people, including his assistant and 2 doctors, charged in Matthew Perry's death. Note that the doctors charged were not his regular doctors. This report indicates that the ketamine overdose was the cause of his death. This is reminiscent of the death of Michael Jackson, whose death was blamed on legally obtained drugs, according to a report at that time. We close with some good financial news for Texas. Saving America recently hailed Chevron's moving its corporate headquarters to Texas. While there are also many financial firms that are finding a friendly and less expensive base in the Lone Star State. Household names like Goldman Sachs, JP Morgan, and Wells Fargo are making major moves in Texas. One statistic is Dallas is second only to New York City in the number of people employed in the financial sector. Saving America welcomes FM Red O'Loughlin III. He is a researcher, author, public speaker, independent publisher, and broadcast host himself. He speaks on health and wellness, aging, personal growth, and motivation. Red retired as a naval captain with 31 years in the Navy Reserves. He was a naval flight officer and flew nearly 1,000 missions in P-3 anti-submarine aircraft. He served in Vietnam and retired as the Deputy Director of Reserve Affairs in Stuttgart, Germany. Red has traveled to 60 countries during his military career. Captain O'Loughlin has been awarded numerous military honors due to his long and distinguished career. Red's professional civilian specialties are quality assurance, reliability engineering, and logistics. He has worked in senior management positions at National Semiconductor, Memorex, Dresser Industries, NL Industries, Boeing, and Halliburton. I had to stop the bio there since otherwise there'd be no time for the interview. Our series of interviews for Saving America establishes that the world is full of interesting people. We welcome Red O'Loughlin for his first appearance on Saving America.
Thank you, Dave. I am really honored to be on your show. I really appreciate the invitation. Thank you.
And in turn, I think, I am what they call a Navy brat. My dad did 28 and a half years in the Navy, so very respectful of the military, and certainly your commitment to the military is much appreciated. With your long military career, what do you think of the current focus of the U.S. military in its difficulty recruiting new enlistees? Do you have some suggestions?
Well, I went in during Vietnam, and so that's a totally different mindset. Because back then I expected, having a degree in chemistry, that I was going to be excluded from the national defense exemption at that time. And then the president decided, no, they want the best and the brightest. Everybody comes in. And so unless you had a family already, or you went to Canada, you were part of that crowd that got there. And so there was very little opportunity for you not to go in. Now, we had the Vietnam War going on, not very popular. You turn that around to look at 9/11, and then everybody's going in. So it's a perspective of what's going on in the world at the time. You have people who says, well, I can go in the military to avoid going to jail. I can go in the military to learn a new trade. I can go in the military to do whatever. So you have people coming in, they want to be pilots. They want to be whatever their passion is. They may not even know what it is. Maybe they just need the stability of the military. So from a perspective, I think that there's a couple drivers. And right now we're in that cycle where you have the wokeness and the DEI and other social engineering things. And I don't think the military ought to be a social engineering organization. You want a tip of a spear that will go in and take care of whatever's there, but you also need the logistical support. You need a lot of other things to make those things happen. So from a perspective of, if 10 years ago, my perspective was different than today, but let's say that you had a a son coming out of high school, and you ask me as a military, would you talk to him? I would say, Dave, I'd be more than happy to. And so I go talk to, let's say his name is John. And John, you're getting ready to graduate. What, you have any career? No, they don't know what they want to do. Well, I would recommend they go in the Coast Guard initially for 2 to 4 years. Why? Because in the Coast Guard, it's a much smaller service and you give a lot more responsibility at the lower levels. You take a level such as a enlisted level 4 second class petty officer, and the responsibility isn't the same. In the Coast Guard, you have tons of responsibility at that level, but in the Navy, Army, and Air Force, they're not allowed that level of responsibility because that's usually reserved 2 or 3 levels up. And so you end up with a situation where you have the military discipline, you have the stability, you have a lot of things there. So now they put 3 or 4 years in, they have some kind of educational program. They get out, they can go to college because now it's going to be paid for. Now, if they want to go in, depending on what their skill sets and what their goals are, they want to go in the Air Force, the Marine Corps, whatever. They have that option. They can go in the reserves. So there's a lot of things there. But I think that the Coast Guard, and I've worked with them a lot over the years, and that's what's changed my perspective. But I think that would be a perfect place for a young person to go because you're going to get that responsibility, the discipline immediately, and then you can make a better decision when you're 20, 21, 22.
Well, switching gears a little bit, Red, I know that your passion is health and wellness. And what of your books might people want to read, and how would that help them? Where can they find those books that you've written?
Okay, all of my books are available on my website or on the Amazon. So I just usually send people to Amazon. It's a lot easier. Just put in Red O'Laughlin and my books pop up. My website is redolaughlin.com. But I'm a researcher. I research the human body at the cellular level, chemically speaking. I look for cause and effect relationships. Treat a cause, fix a problem. Treat symptoms, and you'll always be treating symptoms. And so we have a problem as you're treating symptoms, but the cause keeps getting worse over time, and you see no progress, whatever. So I'm looking for things. In other words, if I were to say, let's get calcium into your bones. Well, you need to take something that's calcium, and most people take calcium carbonate. It's a pill. It's worthless because it takes so much to get a little bit into the body. But let's say you're eating the right combination of fruits and vegetables and you're getting your calcium, but you have to have magnesium in your body in order for that to get processed. It's not bioavailable. So now you get the calcium in the stomach, it's being absorbed, it's leaving the duodenum, and if you have enough vitamin D3, the calcium is going to be pulled into the bloodstream. Okay, now you get in the bloodstream, that's where you want it, but you want it in the bones. However, if you don't have enough vitamin K2, that calcium is going to go to your heart valves and arteries as plaque. So now you have to have vitamin K2, vitamin D3, magnesium, and calcium. So that's kind of, there's other things in there, but that's the short one. Now you get it into the bones, it's much more difficult to keep it in the bones than it is to get it there. Because what happens is your body has what's called a pH. It's a balance between being acidic and alkaline. And the body's blood system needs a pH of about 7.4, plus or minus a little. And so if you're in 7.4, hey, everything's fine. Calcium stays in the bones. Everybody's a happy camper. But anytime you eat protein, fat, carbohydrates, you exercise, you breathe, you think, your body becomes more acidic, less than 7.4. What happens then? The bloodstream reaches into the bones, grabs calcium molecules, and stabilizes the pH of the bloodstream. Now, I've been a runner for decades, weightlifter. I've been all sorts of stuff. The very first time I ever had a bone density test, I was osteopenic, and it just drove me crazy. I couldn't figure out why. Well, I looked at all the things I was doing when I started doing some research, and I was keeping my body severely in that acidic range. So my body was constantly leaching my bones of calcium in order to maintain a blood pH for health. So what happens when you get old? Well, brittle bone, other things, and those things are issues that become a problem. And so you have to take primarily fruits and vegetables in a higher level of dose in order to offset all those other foods you eat and all the other activities you have, just in metabolic processes. So what I do is that's what I look at. Now, I have 2 books out there. The Joy of Ageless Health covers 7 different things: stress, toxins, radiation, infection, inflammation, diet, even expectations. These are things that operate at the cellular level in the body, and do that inflammation chronic low level, you're starting to get some level of mutation at the DNA level. So if that's the case, what can you do about it? Well, with stress, there's certain things, with toxins, there's certain things. And I go into detail on the joy of ageless health as to what can you do to prevent disease from even taking part in the body. So if we follow that other exercise and say, if I'm getting a lot of fruits and vegetables, I'm probably keeping my body alkaline, which just really pushes off a lot of diseases, but also makes us a lot more healthier down the road. The other one that I would talk about today real quickly is the longevity secrets for healthy aging. And that particular one talks about the 2 primary causes of aging: the telomere length at the end of your DNA, where the DNA is kind of wrapped around each other. It's, if you look at your shoelace, you have a caplet at the end, a little plastic thing that keeps all the fibers together. Well, every time the cell replicates, you lose a little bit of the end of that telomere. And over time, the cell replicates enough, boom, there's not enough there, the cell dies, normal death, planned. That's the way everything works. However, if you're overweight, you're a smoker, you have diabetes, instead of having just a little bit of that telomere cut off, you have a lot of that telomere cut off. And so you kind of reduce the age of that cell. The other one is a thing called human growth hormone. When we're little kids, we got tons of that stuff. However, as you get older, you're making less and less. And there's a lot of things with age that you make less and less. Well, something as simple as a fast will cause that human growth hormone to increase significantly. And so those are things that I talk about in there. What causes you to age? What can you do to accelerate your aging? What can you do to decelerate your aging? So those are 2 books that I would recommend: The Longevity Secrets of Healthy Aging and The Joy of Ageless Health. So those are 2 that I would strongly recommend to somebody who has a real interest in keeping their health.
Sounds good to me, Brad. Our third question today is we're going to switch gears a little bit. As you know, we met for lunch recently, and you shared with me your new book, Heaven, the Final Destination. Please tell our audience a little bit about that book and how it might help them.
Okay, I'm a Catholic. I have been all my life. I consider myself devout. I go every Sundays. I go to confession. I keep up with that stuff. I was at church yesterday for a couple hours, adoration, etc. Anyway, I'm getting older. I would love to go to heaven. I think that's our general destination for most of us. That's our desire. Now, Catholics believe in purgatory, which other religions don't necessarily consider. But I want to know, how can I get to heaven, David? Go straight there, bypass purgatory. That was my desire. So when I started researching, I found it's the same thing that I do. If I say, okay, tell me about what causes cancer? What causes Alzheimer's? You can't ask that question. You have to ask it in a roundabout way. Well, the same thing in the Catholic faith. I go to the magisterium, tradition, history, scripture, Bible, and then you have to almost go into some specifics. What did God promise? What did Jesus promise? What did Mary promise? And when I start looking at those things, I can find promises in there. You do this, you get this reward. Okay, well, why isn't the church teaching me more about that? Because that's my long-term destination. I want to know. Well, my perspective is things have changed over time, where they used to talk about heaven and hell and long sermons. Now it's a homily, and it's more or less focused on something that the bishop in the diocese wants to talk about, or something dealing with the gospels and readings of the day. But if we look at sin, and you have the sin, and traditional way that it was explained to us as little kids, you break a window and you go next door and you ask for mercy, you ask for forgiveness, and the guy says, no problem at all, you're forgiven, I understand, you're kids. Well, when I go to confession, that external punishment due to that sin is forgiven, but there's a temporal permanent punishment, not from God's perspective, but from the sin itself. Now, that is the sin that I have to make up for. That temporal punishment, according to the Catholic faith, is something that has to be taken care of in purgatory in order to enter heaven purified. And so I look at those things that, well, how do I get there? Well, baptism, sacrament wipes all that out. So if I wait till I'm 78 years of age, I get baptized and I die at 78 and a half, I'm pretty good shape. But if I get last rites at 78 years of age, that's a free ticket straight into heaven because it removes all that temporal punishment. But there's a lot of other things. If we just look at a simple thing, David, if you don't ask, you're not going to receive. So ask and receive, expect. But the other things in the sacraments, there's a brown scapular. I wear this thing. There's certain promises that with that scapular, you have plenary indulgences. There's certain requirements for that take away the temporal punishment. There are First Fridays, First Saturdays. There's a lot, Seven Sorrows of Mary. There's a lot of things, but I think probably one of the biggest ones is the St. Bridget prayers. There's a 15 prayer combination for a year and a 7 prayer combination for 12 years. And the 7-year compilation is one that specifically God says, you do this for 12 years. And the first thing on the line, it says, no purgatory. Well, I'm at 78 years of age. Well, that's 90. Well, I might as well say it the rest of my life because I'm, at some point in time. Now, let's say that I'm saying it and I've only said it for 5 years. Well, they have a caveat in there that says your intention was you're doing it. Okay, you earned it. So anyway, that's what I talk about in my book. And that if you're a devout Catholic and you want to really know a little bit more about how you get your soul into heaven, I would strongly suggest you look at that one.
Sounds fascinating. I think most of us do want to go to heaven for sure. And Red, you mentioned it a minute ago, but how can our audience get more information about you and your books?
RedO'Laughlin.com. That's RedOlaughlin. RedOlaughlin.com is probably the easiest place to get information about me. I'm available pretty, you give me a call on the phone, I'll talk to you. That's usually the best way to reach me. But I have email sites. I check some of them. I got 3 different ones. I check, one constantly 3, 4, 5, 6 times a day. I check the other ones usually once or twice a day. But yeah, send me an email, give me a phone call, take a look at my stuff on my website. More than happy to have a conversation with you.
Sounds like a winner. Thank you very much, Red O'Laughlin, for joining us on Saving America. As we grow up, a common reference for success or failure is the letter grade. Whether we're in grammar school or college, we all want an A grade and certainly regard an F as a big failure. Here at Saving America, we scan the news for reports of celebrities, politicians, or others who just end up in the public eye. So the A grades are awarded to people and organizations for great service to their communities, and the F grades, of course, are unfortunately more common, are awarded to those who need to do a lot better. This special badge of dishonor this time is for the Indiana School District, specifically East Central High School in St. Leon, where senior Cameron Blasek was told not to fly the American flag from his pickup truck. This was supposedly because this might cause other students to display offensive flags. What? When high schools are embarrassed to have the American flag displayed, the communist takeover of America and specifically its education system has gone far too far. The scumballs in this case originally claimed flying Old Glory could lead other students to display offensive flags. This clarification was that the American flag, it's going to be the exception. Yeah, that was after social media got a hold of it and thousands upon thousands of people responded. So Saving America today awards today's F grade to the administrators and other whack commies of East Central High School in St. Leon, Indiana, whoever told a student that he could not display an American flag on his truck. The Democrat National Convention was held in Chicago. I think just about everybody knows that. It was similar to the Republican National Convention just a month earlier in Milwaukee. My opinion, a total waste of time and space. As before, most of the TV networks aired it every night for a week. If political junkies like me don't care to watch it, how can they expect most of America to watch this boring trash? I do have some reactions, of course. If the conventions are to continue to be aired, At least have some suspense. Don't name who the candidate is until the third day, or at least don't name the vice president. Come on, folks, give us something new. What we saw are a bunch of has-beens throwing trash at the other party. A good example is Biden speaking well after prime time had ended on Monday night. Why bother? Who cares? Who listened? The reports are that the DNC had 20 million on Monday night and the RNC only had 18 million on its Monday night. For the RNC, the peak was Thursday night with about 25 million for Trump's speech. All I can say is there must be a lot of people up there hard up for entertainment to tune this in. I have to question these numbers. I did some research as part of this article to try and see how they decide that there were 20 million or 25 million. And I'm not sure that that represents a number that people actually sat there and watched this boring nonsense for hours on end. I have a feeling that the Nielsen ratings and the things that capture people tuning to a particular station, there's a certain time period and then it said, oh, well, they watched that. But I don't think anybody in America is bored enough to sit there and watch this stuff for 3 or 4 hours at a time. And for instance, in my own case, I did get a chance to flip channels around. I was looking for a channel that didn't have the convention on it. And so if someone was monitoring my TV, they might say, yes, you were on, the NBC chapter and or the channel and the CBS channel and so forth. But that doesn't mean I actually sat there and watched this stuff. But getting back to the content, what little there was, perhaps my favorite piece from the DNC was Vermont Senator Bernie Sanders, as I referred to him, Bernie the Bum. What a piece of work. He complained about how bad things were for working people, high prices and high rents. I think the old bum missed the part about his party has been in power for the last 3.5 years. Right, inflation due to the unrestrained government spending under the Biden-Harris program has ripped the poor and middle class. Now, he's an avowed socialist, but he does not ever explain why the socialist Marxist utopia he promises has people in Venezuela flooding into the US rather than the other direction. Yeah, Bernie, explain that one. In a true bit of irony, the Dems are complaining about Trump launching personal attacks at Harris, but then spent much of their convention making personal attacks on Trump. Why? Since their policies have failed so dramatically, there's not much else they can do, folks. The real story lately has been what some pundits have labeled the basement strategy 2.0. This is by the Harris administration. Recall that a shaky Biden was hidden by his staff for most of the 2020 campaign. Parallel to that, there are still no interviews with Queen Kamala the Incompetent. A month after the Paris coup, we still don't know what her positions are from her own mouth. Of course, her campaign has been covering things up based on her prior very, very far left positions. She did manage to give a speech, however, recently that bodes well for the Trump campaign. She came out and accused the producers of price gouging. No evidence, just a wild accusation. I'm sure her sycophant followers will suck that up. Naturally, there are a few problems with this silly claim. First, the producers cannot sell their products if they charge more to the next competitor. So prices do tend to reflect the actual cost. Producer prices have surged under the Biden-Harris administration due to inflation. Second, inflation in producer prices has in turn caused retail prices to be very high. And yet, maybe Harris should try to focus on the facts. Kroger's margin has actually dropped during the Biden-Harris administration from about 1.6% to about 1.4%. Kroger appears to be trying to help their consumers and remain competitive. Do you think we need to have price controls and accuse them of price gouging? Gosh, I think that margin kind of argues a different story. Third, the Harris solution in her one big speech was price controls and rent controls. Interestingly, it was a Republican administration that tried this and failed. Right, the Nixon administration in the 1970s. It was an utter failure. In fact, one of the reasons that the original big Marxist experiment, the USSR, failed was that production and price controls dictated by the government do not ever work. Price controls produce product shortages, not better consumer prices. In turn, rent controls reduce the availability of housing. So right now, America is facing a true shortage of housing. What causes? Well, part of the problem is the sheer cost of materials impacted by the Biden-Harris inflation. And due to that inflation, the Fed raised benchmark interest rates in order to control inflation, which in turn caused mortgage rates to triple. In other words, Harris is complaining about problems that her own administration created. In the meantime, Tin Walls, her VP candidate, has his own problems. A list of 50 GOP lawmakers who served in the military have signed a document citing egregious misrepresentations by Walls about his time in the Army National Guard. His claims have been labeled stolen valor. The fact that Minneapolis burned during his time as Minnesota's governor does not help his case either. I have previously said that his appointment to the VP slot is yet another gift to the Trump campaign from the Biden-Harris operation. I love the fact that Pennsylvania Governor Shapiro has now come out and said that the failure of Harris to name him as her VP candidate had nothing to do with him being Jewish. Hey, if you buy that, I have a bridge in Brooklyn that I'd like to sell you. Trump needs to get on message and stay on message. As my regular audience knows, I'm a hardcore conservative, not a Trumpster. However, given the far left Harris-Walls ticket, it is not an especially hard choice. Regarding Trump's first term, he had good economic policies. He often comes off as a jerk, and that is hard to fix. I haven't come up with a solution yet. I've been trying to communicate with him, but for some reason, it doesn't seem to be working. He also did a miserable job of picking his staff and who he held over from the failed Obama administration. In a recent speech, Trump explained that he was new to DC in 2017, and that while he picked some good staff people, he admits he picked a bunch of losers as well. And he is saying, I'm now familiar with the game and I will do better this time. I believe him. His loss in 2020 can easily be attributed to the COVID pandemic. The Biden-Harris administration actually did worse with COVID, but voters did not know that when they voted in November 2020. It does remind me of the short recession America experienced in 1992. Americans voted for the unknown and truly unqualified Bill Clinton over George H.W. Bush. The facts are that America was on the way out of that recession when the election took place. So Clinton got to bask in glory of a winning economy during his administration that Bush actually had laid the groundwork for. So what does Trump need to do? He needs to compare each of his successful policies with the Biden-Harris failures, and especially the border, where Harris was the czar. As I've mentioned, she's trying to work her way out of that, but there's far too much legacy there for her to deny that. The economy's got to be number one. Americans were better off 4 years ago than they are today. That is easy and should be center focus of every speech. Just in time for the election sprint, the U.S. Department of Labor just adjusted the jobs data for March 23 to March 24. They reduced the total number of jobs downward by 818,000. Yes, nearly 1 million people less on the work rolls. This is huge. And as Trump justifiably has claimed, much of the hiring under Biden-Harris was just putting people back to work who were laid off due to the COVID dip. Now, Trump is also claiming a lot of illegals now have some of those new jobs. I do not think that's true, but if he has real data, I think he needs to show the voters. The uncontrolled border is number 2. Harris was unquestionably named the border czar and was an absolute failure. Hammer that over and over again. After all, she would not be lying about her title now if she had had any success at all. Number 3, crime is a major factor for most Americans. Harris was soft on crime before getting to the VP slot. She actually tried to raise bail money for people arrested for violence in Minneapolis. How ridiculous. She advocated for no gas bail when she was the California Attorney General. Of course, there's been a major crime wave by illegals in this country. The list goes on and on. No need to repeat it here. Some say, well, there's always crime. Right, but this is in addition crime that would not be committed if these people were not let into the country. Further, as Trump has pointed out, many of the more recent batch of illegals under the Biden-Harris administration were released from prisons and asylums in their home countries. Number 4 is international weakness under the Biden-Harris situation, which has emboldened America's enemies. Russia would likely not have invaded Ukraine under Trump. Further, the soft on Iran policies have allowed Iran to rake in billions of dollars. This has been used to fund proxies who attack Israel from all sides. It is hard to say if October 7th would have happened under Trump. However, it would have been more difficult with a weaker Iran behind those terrorists. Many of the weapons and missiles being used by the terrorists are directly provided by Iran. That's not really a controversial issue. The recent report is that Hamas has named Yahya Sinwar, who is credited with planning October 7th atrocities, as its head. This ties Iran directly to Hamas. Reports are that Iran will likely have a working atomic bomb by the end of this year. The world has become more dangerous under Biden and Harris. Trump has mentioned finally punishing the military leaders who failed America in Afghanistan. He has also promised to get DEI and wokeness out of the military. I am strongly in support of this. Such silly policy has no place in the military in such a dangerous world. Time for America's military to unquestionably be number 1 in the world, and that means peace in the world. Number 5 is a Harris flip-flop on fracking. She has been consistently against it. Lately, her campaign, not her personally, have claimed that she is now okay with it. Let's believe her prior position and make sure the voters, especially in Pennsylvania, which is dependent on fracking, know this. America's energy independence is part of its security. Also, Americans are paying almost double for gasoline and electricity than they did under Trump. This is something that can help with putting those numbers up in lights. Number 6 in the Schein platform proposal for Trump is education. Creeping socialism with DEI and woke approaches has trashed K through 12 and many college educations. I am a professor who can directly state that our K-12 system is not doing its job. Our students are far behind the rest of the world, especially in major Democrat-controlled cities. The tide is already changing as parents revolt. More homeschooling, more private schooling. This is a good time for Trump to track that movement and support it. More esoteric is the Biden-Harris administration's attack on the current justices on the Supreme Court of the United States, SCOTUS. Most Americans are generally happy with the latest rulings of the High Court. I would just mention that Trump's remarkable 3 appointments in 1 term has saved a number of American values. Regarding abortion, best left to the states, and that allows the Trump-Vance team to keep that out of their program. I predicted in a previous Saving America that Christians were right behind the Jews in senseless attacks. There's a reported surge in anti-Christian hate crimes. Sometimes I hate to be right. It's time for church members and related clergy in America to face the fact that it's time to go public and support Israel and the Jewish people. This is no longer an us-them situation. All of you who support a civilized society are the us. The them are the bands of heathens and brainwashed idiots who are protesting for hate. From my earliest days, due to my fine parents, I was brought up respecting people of all colors and affiliations. I'm on the record for supporting equality for the sexes as well. We need to work on educating, not the uneducated, but the miseducated. The sad fact is that too many in our society have been brainwashed. It will be a tough job, but we must persevere since civilization itself depends upon it. That's right, folks. This is a serious fight. Note that even reasonable Middle Eastern countries like Egypt, Jordan, and Saudi Arabia support stopping the Hamas terrorists. Folks, this is a right and wrong situation. We, the American people, and civilized people from all over the world must unite behind an end to terrorism and remember that anti-Semites are always anti-Christians as well. Saving America welcomes Kevin McDonald. Born and raised in Seattle, Kevin is a self-described, jovial, fun-loving man who has experienced life in a big way. He has been a star athlete, actor, restaurateur, sales and sales manager, transit operator, audio producer, talk show host, creative consultant, motivational leader, and podcast host. He is the creator and host of KM Media Pro. He produces and hosts engaging podcasts that cover a wide range of topics. I know him from his Positive Talk radio show, which is on multiple networks, including Brushwood Apple, where his mission is to create positive and uplifting podcasts that inspire and empower people to achieve their goals and dreams. Our series of interviews for Saving America establishes that the world is full of interesting people. We welcome Kevin McDonald for his first appearance on Saving America.
Thank you, sir. I love to be here. This is going to be fun.
I'm looking forward to it. As you know, we ask our guests 3 questions, and the first one is, tell our audience how you went from star athlete to producing and hosting podcasts. That sounds like a non sequitur.
Well, I was too short to go pro, but I enjoyed my time as an athlete and was a boxer for a period of time and all that kind of stuff. And then I went into the restaurant business and restaurant sales, and I may be the only chicken salesman you've ever met.
Tell me more about the chicken.
I worked for a company out of Siloam Springs, Arkansas. And we talked, and it was a vertically integrated chicken company. And I went, traveled the country and sold chicken products to large restaurants and TGI Fridays and Old Spaghetti Factory and a bunch of them. And but there was a point in time, David, when I thought to myself, why am I really here? What's my mission? There's got to be more to it than what I've been told. I had the house, had the dog, had the cat, had the wife, and had the kids. They're all gone now, but I really wanted to understand why I was really here. And one thing led to another, and I got back into radio, which I'd done in college years before. I love it. I just can't stop doing it. It's kind of like a bag of potato chips.
Now, I've got to sneak in here a little quick mini question. Okay, you listed the wife after the cat and the dog. Is that why she's no longer there?
Well, I had to bury all 3 of them in the backyard. No, I'm kidding. The FBI don't come see me, but no, she decided that there were greener pastures elsewhere.
Okay, well, we won't get too far down that trail. By the way, I have worked with a company in Houston as an attorney that took boxes of chicken and took the skin and the bones out of the parts, and then delivered smaller boxes to restaurants for immediate use.
That's a good idea.
Yeah, so it was very interesting. I actually was in their production room, which was a refrigerated chamber where people stood in a line and did the work. They had an interesting problem. They put the skin and the bones in big 55-gallon drums, and they were picked up twice a week. One day, the truck picking up the waste dumped one of the barrels in the middle of the street. So the people did the logical thing. They went out, scooped up the waste, put it back in the bucket, put the bucket back in the waiting for the next pickup truck. And then they rinsed down the street because chicken stuff is slippery. It could cause a car accident. Do you know that the city filed a criminal complaint against them for washing the street?
You're kidding.
They washed the chicken's waste into the gutter. So I do not do criminal law, so I had to refer them to another attorney to represent them. So they paid a $500 fine and kept on boogieing. And today that is, because it was here in the urban area of the historic Houston Heights, that is now a housing project, a high-end housing project. Chicken parts production has now been moved out to the woods somewhere.
Well, you know, somebody had way too much time on their hands.
Yeah, there was a neighbor who didn't like the fact that he had bought a house next to the chicken factory. And you know what? The chicken factory had been there since the 1920s.
He probably should have fired his real estate agent and got another one because they could have told him, you're going to have chicken parts next to you.
Absolutely. Well, listen, we're going to try and keep this on track. Question number 2, in reviewing your main website, I came across Think Energy. Share with our audience how that differs from your other work and efforts.
In addition to, well, originally I started with a show called Spirit Talk, because we wanted to talk about energy and our bodies and our chakras and how that all works. And, you know, like, so I had psychic mediums on and psychics and energy workers and healers and stuff, because I was really interested in the energy that we all have that is part of who we really are. And so I had to divide that show up because I have a staff, and the people in my staff said, you can't do positive energy kind of stuff when you're doing positive talk kind of stuff. They're two different things. So I divided them up, but I still have a love for psychic mediums, and I talk to my dad, my mom all the time, and all that kind of stuff. They're both passed on and that kind of thing. So it's just something that kind of a hobby that I'm interested in.
Well, you may find it interesting that I also am have people in my life who clearly have some psychic visions. Mine personally tend to be about me and what's going to happen in the future and things like that. And sometimes people get very upset. I have some evangelical friends who get very upset, and I'm like, I'm not sure how someone perhaps having visions of the future or the past would in any way be a contradiction of a religious belief. But in any event, I don't get into big arguments with them. But the people that I know who are appear to have some psychic energy are God-fearing people. They're not satanic or anything, but it's very interesting area. And of course, unfortunately, they're running a special on one of the cable channels right now of Miss Cleo, the famed con artist. And unfortunately, that doesn't help anybody, you know, when you have people who are taking advantage of the situation.
That's a really good point, David, is that be careful, because there are people that are going to try and make money from you. And it's like, do you remember the movie Ghost?
Yes, certainly.
Character.
Yeah.
That she was pretended to be a psychic, but she was fake. So just be careful and get a referral and from somebody that's been with them before. It's like I've interviewed John Edward and several folks like that who are really, really, really talented. If we had more time, I'd tell you the story about John Edward, but I know we don't. So we're good.
All right. Well, speaking of time, let's pop the question number 3. Please share with our audience your approach to your positive talk radio, which of course we have the headline behind you. How do you select your guests, and what's the point of the show?
Point of the show is primarily to answer the question that we all have at one point in our life. I know you're on your 3rd career now, and we all have a point in time where we say, why am I really here? what am I really here to do? I'm not here just to, sell chicken in my case, or be a district sales manager or whatever. I'm here to affect the planet in a positive way, I think. And so in order for me to activate that, I started Positive Talk Radio way back in 2003 when, as you were talking about evangelicals, in those days, meditation was something that you didn't do. Yoga was something that you didn't do. Those are now mainstream activities. But over time, I fell back into broadcasting, and the purpose of the show is to show everybody by the interviews that we do that you can be more than you think you can be. You can be anything you want to be. And if you choose to write a book or create a song or to be a coach and to help other people, and regardless of what you're doing, if you're doing it for the right reasons, then you get to be on my show if you want to be.
Well, that sounds great. Have you had a particular guest recently who really stood out? Somebody has said, darn, that's a really interesting person.
Today, as a matter of fact, her name is Michelle Blood. She is a singer-songwriter from Australia, and she was in a near fatal traffic accident.
Wow.
And she used affirmations, positive affirmations, to heal. And she spent the rest of her life working with people like Bob Proctor and Wayne Dyer and some of the greats of the New Thought movement to really help people recognize that they could be more than they think they can be. Because, we were born great, David. I'm going to get on my soapbox if you don't mind. We were all born great, every one of us. But we spend our lives being told by other people, hey, David, you ain't so great. You got a lot of problems. And so what we're trying to let people know is you are great. Own it, live it, love it, and take care of each other and be kind to one another. That's really the premise of the show.
I love the point about being kind to each other, because we certainly have a lack of just basic courtesy and kindness and all that. By the way, you are the first person to mention Wayne Dyer's name in ages, and I have a very interesting connection to him. When I went to work on my MBA, I went to the Virginia Darden School to do a full-time MBA. They introduced a class that was a new discipline. It was called organizational behavior, which is a very basic course in MBA programs today, but they were inventing it. They didn't have a textbook yet. So they had a book called I'm Okay, You're Okay, a bestseller by Wayne Dyer. And it's kind of interesting because I just find it interesting what we worked with in mid-1970s and what it has developed into with these big long textbooks and all that. And frankly, I was perfectly fine with I'm okay, you're okay. And I like the upbeat approach and the application of it. So I think it's pretty interesting.
Yeah, and just as an aside, I end every show with be kind to one another because each other's all we've got. And the whole premise of, and I forgot to mention I was also a bus driver for 12 years. And when you're
I missed that in your bio.
It was getting too long. But when you're a bus driver and you get to talk to all kinds of people, I'd been in the corporate world, and like you, I've talked to people that are vice presidents and making, 6 figures and 7 figures and playing golf in hoity-toity golf courses and having $400 and $500 dinners. And then I ended my working career before I started the podcast by driving a bus where people couldn't afford $2 for bus fare.
Incredible.
I learned that we are all one, we are all together, and that we have individual life experiences, but we can be whatever we choose to be.
Absolutely. Well, I think that's a great way to wrap up this interview. Kevin, tell people how our audience can get more information about you.
If you want, well, you can talk to my ex-wife, and she'd have lots of things to say that might not necessarily be all that flattering, mind you. No, Kevin@kmmedia.pro. That's my personal email, and you can do that. You can also listen to the Brushwood Media Network. We're on at 5 p.m. Monday through Friday and at midnight Monday through Friday. And we have all kinds of interesting people. And you're going to be on that show one of these days fairly soon. And we've got something that may be coming up soon that we can't talk about yet, but we'll talk about it later, kind of thing.
Sounds like a winner to me. Business students, business persons, or consumers, business law impacts much of what you do. This segment is designed to help you get past the headlines on key stories. Court battles heat up between the AI music generators and the music industry itself. Three of the biggest record labels, Sony, Universal Music Group, and Warner Records, are suing AI song companies, Suno and Udio, in courts in Boston and New York. The two defendant companies, Suno and Udio, use material taught to the AI systems to churn out what it calls original songs. The record labels are claiming that the material is too similar to their original material, which is what teaches the AI systems to get the ball rolling. Note that Suno is tied to Microsoft, so it has a big brother, so to speak. I listened to a song created by Udio called BBL Drizzy. Yes, folks, which has reportedly gone viral. It sounded like many of the great earlier soul songs. The record companies argue that it is too much like a great soul song already in their music libraries. Not clear which one, but kind of in the ballpark there. Leading the plaintiff effort in these cases is the Recording Industry Association of America, RIAA. This association represents many of the major labels. The RIAA is seeking damages of up to $150,000 per work released by the AI companies. RIAA Chief Legal Officer Ken Dorshow said in a press release, "These are straightforward cases of copyright infringement involving unlicensed copying of sound recordings on a massive scale." In response to the suit, Mikey Schulman, CEO of Suno, stated, "The company's technology is transformative and designed to generate completely new outputs, not to memorize and regurgitate pre-existing content. The AI producer's argument is that this new material is kind of inspired by prior work, but not copying it directly." As examples by RIAA of how close is too close in the AI productions, it cited a song generated by Suno titled "Deep Down in Louisiana, Close to New Orleans."
Deep down in Louisiana, close to New Orleans, way back up in the woods among the evergreens.
I listened to this and to my rock and roll ear, this sounded a lot like a recording of Johnny Be Good by Chuck Berry. I thought it sounded very close. Another example is something called Prancing Queen. That sounds a lot like Dancing Queen, the big hit by ABBA. However, in this case, while the music is extremely similar, the lyrics follow the same concept, but are indeed different. This sort of kind of like a kid trying to write music similar to one of his guitar heroes. So he writes new, but similar lyrics to a music track, very close to one of his favorites. So kind of juvenile, I guess I'm saying. It is too soon to tell, but for now, it seems to me that the music industry has the upper hand in this until the AI has advanced a great deal further. Thanks for joining me for Saving America. If you have questions or comments, please find me on various social media sites. I'm Dr. David D. Schein, and I will see you next week.
Welcome to USA Global TV and Radio, where our mission is to provide education, entertainment, hope, and inspiration. USA Global TV and Radio connects you with experts and audiences all around the world every single day to help you succeed in business and to live a richer life. Visit us at usaglobaltv.com to learn about career and life-changing training and mentoring programs like the Listening Mentor. Subscribe to our newsletter to stay informed about our special programs and offers. Discover how you can become a guest on one of our shows or a host or producer of a USA Global TV and Radio show of your very own. That's USA Global TV and Radio, where the doctor is always in.